G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder Ground Forces with Mags. Sorry for the recent drop in videos. I've actually been rather unwell for almost the last week and haven't been up for making videos, but we're all good, we're back on schedule now, so let's get back to it. So with the recent dropping of the new patch, we have some new toys to look at, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sturmpanzer 43 Bomber, and I've probably pronounced that wrong, so I apologise in advance. The new German premium tank destroyer, or premium derp cannon. So this cute little beast will set you back about 2,980 golden eagles, or roughly 3 golden eagles wages and part of your soul to finish the grind on them. The Bomber is a rank 3 battle rating 5 premium of the German army, and as a true derp cannon it features a 150mm howitzer with 38 shots maximum. The reload on a skilled crew will take around about 21 seconds per shot with a negative 8 degrees of gun depression at maximum and 30 degrees of gun elevation. This thing can fire like an artillery piece, and it is one of the main areas that this thing is really useful. Based on the hull of a Panzer IV, it comes in at 28.2 tons with a 265 horsepower engine that can theoretically get the tank to 40 kilometers an hour. However, unless you can find a really steep slope or a cliff to throw it over, you're rarely going to see above 30. So, while we continue to make our way into the combat zone, how about we take a look at some armor? So, first things first, we hit the armor viewer, and our front plate on this tank is 100mm thick. It is effectively 120 to 130mm based on the height of the tank that is firing at you, as it's angled back at 38 degrees. This is not bad front armor, however at a battle rating 5 tank, it is likely to be penetrated by anything from battle rating 5 and up quite easily. Now, your side turret cheeks over here are only 60mm thick, however they angle back at between 150 and 180 degrees, depending on the angle of attack that you've got the tank on from the front, so these cheeks are quite fine. Honestly, anybody is just going to aim at this section of the tank and punch a hole straight through your front armor before they try and shoot through the cheeks at the higher angle. Your front plate appears to be only 50mm thick, but if you look from above, there are in fact 2 of them stacked on one top of one another. This still only gives you effectively 100mm from the front, and it's near perfectly flat. The tracks here at extra 15mm aren't going to change anything. A direct hit here will penetrate the front. The lean back on the this front plate, this top plate here, is 20mm thick, but at the angle that it's on, it's basically an auto bounce zone. So, 100mm at 123 at 38 degrees. That is something you would need to angle in order to survive, and unfortunately that is a problem because we have the production version of this tank, not the late war version of it. The late war version didn't have the turret cheeks, but we've got the one that does, which means when you try and angle that front plate, you present the front corners of the tank at only 60mm, and that is a problem. Side armor is only 50mm thick, rear armor is only 20, top deck is only 10, which means it can be penetrated by 50 caliber fire, and if you get below these 5mm side skirts down into the side panels of the tank, it's only 20mm underneath, so this can be penetrated by anti-aircraft fire. So overall, from an armor perspective, this tank is exceptionally soft. There are in fact very little vehicles that it faces that cannot reliably kill it, mostly in one shot. 9 out of 10 times, due to its small size and how compact its ammo and its crew is, you will die in one hit. But so will everything that you hit. Yes, the selling point of this tank is most certainly not its armor, and it's not even its mobility, although its small size can be useful. Unlike a derp cannon like the KV-2 for example, the Sturmpanzer 42 has a much smaller profile, which means it's much easier to get this thing into a position where it can potentially fire that gun without being detected. And that's incredibly important, because as you just saw from the armor viewer, if this thing gets detected, it's dead. Well, it's dead unless it happens to have a loaded gun pointing in the right direction, in which case whatever is in front of it won't be for very long. So, let's talk a little bit more about the gun. The shell velocity here is very low. We're talking under 300 meters per second, regardless of your shell type. And we get a really lucky hit there that happens to hit only the front plate on an angle. And there it is, looks like we got a Hellcat up top. Looks like the shell landed just a little bit too short. This is one thing to remember about this particular tank. With 30 degrees of elevation inside of the gun, this thing can operate like a player-controlled artillery piece, and you can use it to lob shells over buildings, over towns, over mountains, and hit what's on the other side. However, the higher angle you tend to fire from, the more drift I've found the shell actually has. From maximum elevation, your target zone is really about 100 meters wide, so don't expect to do any long-range artillery hits and pinpoint taking out light tanks. But if there's somebody entrenched in a position up a hill, this thing is surprisingly useful at getting them out. And at the very least, even if you miss, watching one of the high explosive shells from this thing detonate so close to your tank tends to get people to move. So speaking of high explosives, let's talk about the ammunition availability in this tank. Now this thing gets 2 shells to choose from. The first is the standard shell that I'm using here. This is the JGR38 high explosive fragmentation shell. This is a 38 kilogram shell moving at 240 meters per second. It carries an amatol based explosive with the equivalent of 8.6 kilograms of TNT on board. It'll penetrate through 60 millimeters of armor at pretty much any distance and any angle, and has virtually no chance to bounce. It's a giant basketball of high explosive, and if it hits you, it's probably going to kill you, unless you're in a heavy tank and you get really lucky. But of course that is only shell 1 of 2. The second shell that's available is the JGR39HI-A. This is a heat round, a high explosive anti-tank shell, and a 25 kilogram one to top it off. Moves again at 240 meters per second, carries an RDX TNT compound with the equivalent of 5.32 kilograms of explosive on board. This will penetrate 250 millimeters of flat armor down to 216 millimeters at 60 and then down to 124 at 30, regardless of range. Of course, it does suffer a rather nasty increase in a chance to bounce whenever fired at any kind of angled armor, so if you're going to load that shell up, aim at the flattest surface you can and fire. It will likely penetrate. So, as we make our way down to the enemy's cap zone, because it's pretty quiet through here, we seem to somehow manage to avoid nearly the entirety of the enemy team. Let's go take a quick look at this tank's internals. Alright, so taking a quick look at this tank's internals, and as you can see, it is very, very, very cramped inside, as it's based on a Panzer IV chassis. Now, we have 5 crew members, we have the driver, we have the gunner, we have the commander, we have the loader, and then we have the machine gunner, who is extremely odd for him to be there, because this tank has no machine gunner, it has no secondary armament. He's basically a replacement crew member for one of these 4 when they die, and they will die. Around the rest of the tank, as you can see, the entire crew compartment is wrapped in 150mm shells and the propellant charges for the 150mm shells. So not exactly an environment you want a shell going off in. And this is what I was talking about when I said that anything that penetrates this tank will likely take out the crew or cause an ammo rack detonation. There's simply so much packed into such a confined space that it's near impossible to miss once a shell is actually inside. Now you can take some of the shells out to reduce the amount of ammo that is on board and thin down these racks. The shells will start stripping out from the rear of the tank, however you still wind up with the shells on the side, and with how compact the fighting compartment is on this tank, getting fragments into these side ammunition racks is not difficult in the slightest. Now, of course, we have the engine bay, twin fuel tanks and a fuel tank underneath the floor. Hits to any of these will likely cause fuel ignitions. Fires on this thing is very common, and as I said, with this top deck being susceptible to penetration by 50 caliber fire or above, aircraft lighting your fuel tanks on fire happens all the bloody time. So back to the battle, and we've finally managed to crawl our way up to the enemy's cap circle, and we've slipped around behind some buildings, so we've just taken a hit from the right hand side. Now this was the equivalent of a glancing blow in this particular machine. It was a glancing blow because we actually survived it. As you look at the damage on the lower left hand corner of the screen, you can see that this one shell impact took out our driver, took out our loader, took out the machine gunner, injured the commander, and critically damaged the right ammunition rack, while also doing light damage to the gunner. Thankfully the tank is still operable, so I can bury my ass in the corner of these 2 buildings here. I know the enemy has seen me go around this corner. Now I'm going to keep checking to my right, because they may try and flank me, but I'm just going to hope he comes around directly from the front. And if you look carefully around the front of the building here, you'll see the front of the tank bouncing back and forth. He knows exactly where I am, and he knows I'm buried in this corner. And around he comes, and he shouldn't have done that. And there's my third kill of the match. And from this point on, I'm pretty much going to camp in this position trying to cap this circle for the rest of the match. The problem with this particular tank is it's not really designed as a pusher tank. It does not have the armor capability to front up against enemy vehicles. Unfortunately, there isn't really a place for a low-velocity, long-range support artillery tank destroyer in this game. There's definitely no position for a bunker buster tank, which is really what this is. It's a machine that was designed to punch open pillboxes more than anything else. And as a result, it really doesn't fit the meta particularly well. There's no real place for it. It is incredibly fun to dirt people in the face with a 150mm cannon, don't get me wrong. I will never stop laughing at both the explosion, the destruction of the tank, and the absolute rage this thing can generate from the people it kills in chat. But at exactly the same time, it's actually less effective than other tanks I could bring into battle. Now, it did take a couple of minutes for the enemy team to locate me again, and when they finally did, well, at least he was wishing that he didn't, and that brought me up to kill 4 in this particular vehicle. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Remember how I said earlier that even AAA trucks with armor penetrating rounds can penetrate the lower side armor in this tank with absolutely no problems whatsoever? Somebody got smart and realized that flanking me might be the better option, and unfortunately his very first shot took out my tracks. I couldn't rotate through to him, and it was only a matter of time before, despite coming in at an angle, one of those rounds went through that lower side armor and killed my last crew member. And it's of course completely to be expected. The Bomb Bear is not designed as a frontline tank, but every battle in War Thunder is a frontline battle. It's incredibly fun to dirt people, but it is nowhere near armoured enough to actually be able to survive any kind of return fire. Outside of the fun you can have with the 150mm main gun, this premium KV-1 that's also battle rating 5 is actually in many ways, if not most ways, far more effective on the battlefield than the new Sturmpanzer. But of course, if you're in the market of looking at a derp gun, you've got to compare it against the derp gun, the KV-2. Well, the KV-2's frontal armour is less impressive at only 75mm, however it is 75mm on the sides as well, with only the rear being a soft spot. It's also only battle rating 4.3, which means it will only face battle rating 5.3 vehicles at maximum. This makes a huge difference to its overall survivability. In terms of gun performance, the Brummbär definitely has the more powerful gun, with a significantly larger high explosive shell. The KV-2's gun is capable of putting shells down range at 540 meters per second, so its direct fire capability is far better, it's far more accurate. It requires much less lobbing of shells to be able to strike a target. So, in the end, I guess the Brummbär is more of a novelty tank than anything else. It is incredibly fun to drive it as a tank destroyer, but there are better tank destroyers that you could potentially be taking around the battle rating 5 range into battle, or even from before that, that would be more effective as a competitive tank in a ground forces match. In terms of derp ability, I think the KV-2 is still a more enjoyable derp tank. Again, and it comes down to that survivability. Even though the Brummbär technically has the better gun, it's no good if you die the first time somebody sees you. You need to be able to actually shoot it. And regularly in matches you'll find yourself unable to fire your own weapon when you take the Brummbär into battle. Anyways, ladies and gents, this match wound up in a victory, first place with 6 kills total, but it did drag on for quite a bit, so we're just going to skip through all of that now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Videos will be back to normal schedule now. I think I'm good enough for that. And until next time, click like if you do. Remember, if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe if you want to see more. Drive smart, drive safe, and I'll catch you on the battlefield.